Hello and welcome back to another character analysis. We're continuing our look at the characters made available through the Rise of Phoenix DLC, and today's character is everyone's favorite futuristic X-Men, Cable. Now Cable was a bit of a surprise, at least to me, but he has had some fairly rising popularity since his first introduction into Marvel Comics. Now he has been around for the better part of about 20 years. First being introduced in Uncanny X-Men number 201 in January of 1986. So he has been around for a while. Now, Cable is the son of Scott Summers and Jean Grey. So he has some very interesting powers that you'd come to expect from that type of parenthood. Namely, he has telekinesis and telepathy, as well as having the ability to teleport. He has cybernetic enhancements and is also an expert marksman and hand-to-hand combatant, though the majority of his kit that we see demonstrated here in the game tends to focus on his marksmanship more than anything else. And another thing that is important to note about Cable is he was sent to the future because Apocalypse, the villain Apocalypse, infected him with a techno-organic virus, and the only way to really save him was to send him forward in time to a timeline where they had a little bit more medical capability of dealing with, and as he learned to suppress that virus, he gained a lot better control over the rest of the moves and powers that he has in his arsenal. The abilities that he has access to are fairly interesting and do a lot for the character in terms of allowing him to put out pretty exorbitant amounts of damage. The first attack which he has is the Extreme Arsenal, where he summons an autonomous gun that fires a beam in front of it. It doesn't really have the ability to be manipulated, and sadly you can only summon one at a time, but it's as if you had an extra half person on your side of the battlefield dealing a little bit extra damage for you. The second attack, which he has access to, is the Gravity Bomb, and this is a move that's similar to what we've seen from fights including Magneto in the main story quest, where he sets an explosive charge that draws in surrounding enemies. So if you have characters that can deal large amounts of burst damage in a confined area, then it's going to be really nice to have Cable set up this Gravity Bomb type area first, and then have your damage dealers go in and just face roll over the opponents that it draws in, because it does draw in all characters in terms of the grunts as well as the characters that have stagger bars. It's unclear whether or not it works on bosses. I'd imagine that it may not, but that'd just be a little too overpowered if it did. His third ability is not actually an attack, but it is a tech shield, where it creates a barrier that blocks attacks and also reflects beams from team members. And this is one that you hold to continue blocking. You do remain stationary during the use of this ability. You can't walk around, similar to Colossus and other opponents that have, or characters that have defensive type abilities. His fourth and final ability is another attack type ability. It's the TK Spike, where he attacks surrounding enemies with powerful psychic energy. You can hold this button to continue to attack, but if you hold it for too long, the psychic feedback will reduce your own defense for a short time afterward. And you can be knocked out of this as you start to charge it up before you unleash it. So do keep that in mind as you make yourself increasingly vulnerable the longer you hold it, and while you're charging it as well. In terms of the characters that you need to have around, or at least the ones that I found to fully benefit from Cable's unique 6 synergies, of course it makes sense that Cyclops would be on the team given that he's his father. The others you can accomplish by bringing along Magneto and Storm. So let's go ahead and jump over to the Gauntlet to show or review what you need to do in order to unlock Cable and make him a playable character to you, and then jump into a 200 style rift to showcase just what he looks like gameplay wise. Now once you have the Gauntlet menu open, the rift that you will need to go over to is the level 35, which is Fight for the Future. And once you have this rift open, you will see that it's a pretty standard 3-part gauntlet that you'll need to go through. The first portion of this gauntlet is defeating Nebula and Ronan. Pretty standard fight, especially if you've only played through the first portion of the game. You'll be familiar with both of these characters, where the thing that you do need to be aware of in this fight is the most efficient way to deal your damage is by using extreme attacks. Everything else deals basically no damage at all, which can prove to be a little bit difficult with the danger room hazards that crop up, but you just set one or two of your guys to, with a vast area of effect, to target those and you should be fine. Especially because you can be rattling off your extreme attacks every 20 to 30 seconds per character, so they do make it pretty easy to accomplish within that 5-minute time frame. The second of these rifts, or this portion of the gauntlet, it requires you to defeat all enemies that are present in order to clear out and move on. You have 6 minutes to do so. It does involve you, I believe, going through the hell portion of the storyline, if I'm remembering correctly, but as long as you knock out the characters, you really shouldn't have anything to worry about. In this particular rift, the abilities and synergies through your team deal more damage, while everything else deals less, and the EP that you gain back from using your standard attacks is increased, so it makes it a little bit easier for you to cycle through those attacks as well. The third and final portion of this gauntlet that you'll need to clear out is pretty straightforward. Cable shows up and you got to take him down. You've got 6 minutes to do so. No other caveats or special elements to this quest. It's just you show up and you do it. So pretty straightforward there. And then you have Cable on your team, which you can use to trek through into the other portions of the game. Speaking of that, let's go ahead and check into our favorite 200 style enemy rift and showcase what Cable looks like in action. So the first thing we'll want to note about Cable is he does have a teleport as his double jump, similar to what we've seen with Deadpool, which makes sense given that's a part of his character bio. His melee attacks are 3 blasts from his pulse rifle. They've got some pretty good range and knockdown on them. And his aerial is a blast that, as far as I can tell, comes out of that flaming eye socket that he has. Or glowing eye socket, I guess I should say. Now, in terms of all of Cable's attacks, he's vastly reliant on being a ranged or projectile character. As a matter of fact, his only melee attack is his heavy attack, where he lunges out with his bionic arm. Now, in terms of his standard attacks and abilities, we first have the Extreme Arsenal, where a gun that is autonomous, impervious to damage, and just kind of sits there, tracks onto enemies that are nearby, will be summoned, and you can't manipulate it, but it will kind of home onto opponents and enemies that are near. His second attack, which I feel is one of his most useful, is that gravity bomb, because it will actually draw in even these larger characters with stagger bars. And then as long as you've got some attacks that you can easily use to burst down these characters, you can really take advantage of bringing those characters together pretty closely. His fourth ability is the Tech Shield, and you'll notice that as I stand here, I can kind of get knocked or banged around by the opponents that are trying to attack me, but I am completely impervious to that damage. So if you have a particularly annoying boss that you're trying to take down that just doles out hefty amounts of damage, that's an easy escape. His fourth and final attack, which he has, is this TK Spike, which you can get knocked out of, as you notice here. The smaller opponents will get caught up in the charge and startup of it, but do remember that you can get knocked out of opponents who come rushing in. In terms of his ultimate attack, or extreme ability, he summons a bunch of these futuristic lasers similar to his first ability, and it hones in just in front of him and draws those characters in to have the damage dealt. Now, in terms of his viability, he's not super great up close and personal. You do want to kind of rely on being at a distance as much as possible, but that's pretty efficiently done and accomplished with his kit. So, and if you do have or find yourself in a bit of a pickle, it's nice that his Techno Shield provides him a pretty reliable escape from any unnecessary damage. So Cable's quite a bit of fun. I don't prefer overall the melee type characters or the range type characters, just because I'm more of a hands-on type character with the type player with the characters that I tend to gravitate a little bit more towards. But he certainly can be a lot of fun to use, and I don't want to bag on him at all, because he does have some pretty unique abilities and is a very heavy damage dealer. So be sure to pick him up if you haven't done so already, as he's a nice addition to the team. We'll be back on Friday with our final character analysis. That will be for Phoenix. So make sure you're subscribed. Feel free to ring the bell if you want to know when that video drops as well. And until then, thanks again for watching, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.